Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Kolbert. I'm the head of research at Boral Capital. I'm very excited today to have the post State of the Union with Steve Lisi talking about Beyond Air. Ticker symbol is XAIR. It's a stock that we fundamentally really like. We currently have a price target of $11 on the stock. And we're going to talk a little bit in the post-earnings wrap-up about what are the events, what are the catalysts, what are the fundamentals of the company. But before we get into that, a couple of things. The company did recently raise capital. Boral Capital was an advisor, so I want to make sure that we make that disclosure. And just for the record, I mean, that's great. It has nothing to do with me as an analyst. I am on the other side of what's called the Chinese wall, and my ratings are based on my outlook of the company fundamentally, and that will never change. So, with that said, I've known Steve Lisi for quite a long time. I used to call on him when he was at Deerfield, and he's someone who understands Wall Street, had a very, very successful career. If you don't know, Deerfield is one of the top funds in the country, very focused on healthcare. And when I first heard that Steve was involved with Beyond Air, I was surprised because we don't see a lot of very successful portfolio managers take on projects like this. So I'd like to begin with asking Steve to introduce yourself a little bit and help me understand what was your motivation to take on the CEO role. I'm sure you've seen it done many, many times, but now you're actually doing it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction. Much appreciated. Yeah, so um, taking on the CEO role was not a goal of mine. It wasn't like a dream of mine or anything like that. It was just doing healthcare for 30 years. Just wanted to see, after my Wall Street career, I decided to, stay in the healthcare space and just do it from a different perspective. So Beyond Air is not my first company. I was affiliated with a different company before this. So kind of, learned from that first company and came to Beyond Air and was just on the board. And, what drew me to become the CEO was the CEO at the time was saying, look, there's an opportunity here with nitric oxide that, we weren't aware of. And that was the generator technology. When we first did this, it was focusing on high concentration nitric oxide for lung infections. And nitric oxide certainly works there. It's been proven not just by us, but by others as well. There are two recently published papers which combine multiple studies on nitric oxide's impact on various lung infections. So once we,
Validating your perspective early on that there had a
yeah,
medical benefit associated with NO therapy.
absolutely, absolutely. So that was what this company was founded on. And, this generator technology came about, and we met with the inventors of this technology back in 2017 and sat down and said, look, we can mutually benefit from a partnership. And we formed a partnership, and, it worked out very well. They were able to take this generator technology and make it commercial, which is amazing. And it's got two real benefits. One is the benefit of the machine that's on the market today for acute pulmonary hypertension in the hospital around the world. By the way, we're partnered in 40 countries besides the United States, approved in 25 of them at this point. Um, also the generative technology could be used outside of the hospital setting. So we originally
I
started.
just want to interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second because
sure.
you used the word generative technology, and I want people to understand that, NO has been used for a long time in a variety of applications. I guess you could argue off-label as a gas, where companies supply cylinders, big metal tanks of gas. And anybody who's ever been involved in anything in the science, you know that cylinders of gas are always involved, whether it's in chromatography, as a carrier gas, et cetera. And, there are a lot of requirements for dealing with these big steel cylinders. They're pressurized. If they fall over, they could be dangerous. And so when you talk about what you're doing, what you're saying is, hey, this is a different way to supply gas to the hospital. So tell me a little bit about like what it was that you saw and what the opportunity is.
Right. So thanks, Jason. Let's step back and say the generator technology is we make nitric oxide from ambient air. That's the technology. So we have a small chamber the size of your fist, and inside that chamber are two electrodes. And when we plug in the machine into the wall, any standard electric outlet works. There's no special power needs. We just create a plasma arc of electricity that will disrupt the oxygen and nitrogen molecules and recombine or combine them into nitric oxide, or NO, as we say. So you'll hear me say NO, that's nitric oxide. Um, that's how it works. It sounds fairly simple. My engineers always get angry when I make it sound so easy. It's just not as easy as it sounds. It's very difficult to build this chamber and to control the nitric oxide that you've created in terms of the concentration that you need and deliver it to the patient. Okay, so nitric oxide has been approved since 1999 for use in neonates who were born with hypoxic respiratory failure,
So
or
premature
blue babies.
babies who have trouble breathing benefit
Correct.
from NO therapy.
Yeah, there's a level of preemie where they can go down to 34 weeks or so is on label. But beyond that, outside the United States, it's approved for cardiac surgery where there's right ventricular dysfunction. So most of the use in the United States is in cardiac surgery. It just happens to be off label. It's not off label anywhere else in the world. Um, so nitric oxide is widely used, is widely considered standard of care for these situations. And again, as you mentioned, the nitric oxide is delivered into cylinders, and then there's a delivery system that will control the nitric oxide release from the cylinders and deliver it to the ventilator circuit. All of these patients are on ventilators. They use nitric oxide today. So what we had as a vision was to bring a generator technology machine to the hospital to make their lives a lot easier, the medical staff, and improve the situation for the patient in certain cases. So that's what we've done. It's been a difficult launch. We launched in late 22, right in the middle of the pandemic. May in retrospect may have been a different way to handle this or do better, but that's what we did, and we are proud of the machine we built and proud of the lives we've helped in the U.S. as well as around the world as we're starting to gain traction globally. The goal,
Again, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
one very important point. Hospitals could get NO in tanks. Is there an economic benefit to using your system versus tanks?
sure. There's two ways to look at it. One way is we save time and space in the hospital. So you don't have to store cylinders anywhere. That saves you space. It's not easy to store these cylinders. Moving them around the hospital, you're saving time for the respiratory therapist is the one who uses nitric oxide in the U.S. hospital. So that is your time and space being saved. And it is used around the hospital. So you'll have one storage space, but it could be used in the NICU or the PICU or the CICU. So it's not as if there's cylinders just sitting in each one of these areas of the hospital being ready for use. So we are saving a lot of time and energy and space. So that's
And you
one.
don't have to change cylinders out, right? So one
Oh,
unit runs, is it what how one unit is equivalent to how much NO?
so a system, an entire system can run for 1,000 hours before it comes in and we change out that reaction chamber where we make the nitric oxide. That's every 1,000 hours. But to protect patients, when we make nitric oxide from ambient air, when nitric oxide mixes with oxygen, it becomes nitrogen dioxide or NO2. That's not good for us. So low levels of NO2 have no impact on the human body, but higher levels of NO2 can cause problems. So we have a filter called our NO2 smart filter. Our machine cannot begin making nitric oxide without it. We have an RFID chip that is unique to our system. So that filter is changed every 12 hours, no matter what. Doesn't matter what
Is
type of
that pretty easy to change? It just the operator can,
less than 5 seconds.
yeah,
It's
great.
Look, we're old enough to remember. It's like putting in an 8-track tape. If you remember that how easy that was, just pop it in there. It's something that simple, and anyone can do that, right? It's not hard. Even I can do it. So it's not so hard. But
And what's the business
that
model look like? So if I'm selling a tank, I guess I sell by the tank, right? Or by the lot of tanks. How
no.
does your business model work?
So this was a monopoly for 20 years. So the first company in the market, it had been purchased a few times. So it ends up being part of a company called Mallinckrodt. I believe they've now spun their business out. It's called something else. But this was a monopoly, and the way it was set up was that you paid by the hour. Okay, so you got, let's just make up numbers, right? You're going to pay $100 an hour for nitric oxide. Okay, so as the cylinder valve is opened, whether you have it opened all the way or 20% of the way or 2% of the way or 50% of the way, it didn't matter. Your meter's running. Okay, so that valve's open, nitric oxide's flowing, your meter is running every second. Like you flip on the light switch in your house, the meter's running. You leave your house, forget to turn the light switch off, you're still paying. Same thing with the cylinders, right? So that's how they set the system up. And they were monopoly and they did a great job and they did a great job for their investors. Absolutely. Give them a ton of credit for what they've done. It was really well done by them. But now they've set this stage that that's how the market is. So you go to a hospital and you say, how many hours of nitric oxide do you use? I use 5,000. Okay, I'm going to give you an hourly rate. We're going to come up with a number, divide by 12. That's what you pay me every month. And that's how it works. So the way we track, we have a counter on our machine, but we also track the filters, right? So if you want to use, you know, 5,000 hours, we give you 5,000 hours worth of filters. Each filter is 12 hours. We take 5,000, divide by 12, boom, that's how many filters you get. So
Gotcha.
it's pretty simple. And cylinder guys will just say, hey, you know what? We're using our infrared sensor to count the amount of hours you're using on nitric oxide while the cylinder is open. And when you get to a certain level, you've used up all your nitric oxide for the year.
So there's a convenience factor, whether there's a safety factor. Is there a price competitive factor, or are you equivalent in terms of pricing?
Sure, we can beat any other price from any other player, any price. So
Right.
think about it this way. We don't have a manufacturing facility to manufacture nitric oxide. So that's a huge expense that doesn't exist. We also don't have the logistics involved with shipping cylinders back and forth on a regular basis, right? I mean, some hospitals, you're in there every week exchanging cylinders, right? Some may be less frequent, but there's some high users there. So all of that expense, the infrastructure for that doesn't exist for us, right? So we have a lot of savings from a cost perspective versus our competition. So we're not looking to drive price into the ground and destroy value, right? But we
Of
want to
course
get a
not.
fair,
Right.
we want to have a fair price for the hospital, and make a healthy margin for our investors as well. And we will offer discounts to hospitals where we deem it to be the right thing to do, right? If our competitor is keeping their price super high, it's not worth it for us to be up there. But again, there is a price point in this market where I think it's very fair for the hospitals and we can make a healthy profit for our investors.
Tell me a little bit about what it took to get approval and begin the commercialization process with this first generation unit now.
Yeah, so the FDA hadn't seen anything like this before. We spent a lot of time with them. They were great. They learned about our system. We had our engineers in there explaining how it works and what it does. So our patents are out there. We have patents that go out, to 2040 and beyond at this point. But there is a, trade secret that we use that we haven't exposed in any of our patents, and we had to explain to FDA what we did with our system to make it work the way it works. So we did that, and they were great. Once they understood it, they said, "Wow, that's amazing. Okay, let's move forward." So we moved forward with our first generation machine, and unfortunately, it was submitted in September of 2020. So It took
Everything takes longer than you think, right?
almost took, well, it was the submission was delayed because of our the lovely pandemic we had, and then it
Right.
took almost 2 years to get approval. And again, FDA did a great job under the circumstances, right? I mean, they were dealing with the pandemic, so give them an enormous amount of credit for working with us and taking the time that they did. So it did, things were definitely delayed and drawn out. It was difficult, and just launching the product in the middle of the pandemic and getting things done. We wanted to help hospitals. We wanted to get our system out there, and that's what we did. It just took a little bit of time from when it was built in, frozen design in the beginning of 2019 to, putting it in the market at the end of 22 was a challenge for us to get certain things upgraded through FDA after approval and tweaks and so forth. And the machine now is an outstanding machine. It just wasn't outstanding the day we launched it because we still had to make some adjustments, which is normal in the medical device world. First generation medical device, that's normal.
All right. So you're now in the commercialization process. I know in the recent quarter you talked about the number of hospitals. I think you mentioned 45
Yeah.
US hospitals have already adopted the technology. I know that you provided physical 2016 guidance, 12 to 16 million. That starts to get those are real revenues, right? Those are real numbers.
Yeah.
We tell me a little bit about what is the domestic opportunity, what's the international opportunity, and Steve, we've already had this conversation. One of the things that I really like to do as an analyst is I want to look at the 10-year picture, right? I grew up in the pharmaceutical industry. In the pharmaceutical industry, you never look at a 2-year picture. You're like over 10-year period. Where is our therapy going to be? What are the other competing therapies? What do we expect the total value of this? And so, we do have this modeled out 10 years. We believe that, this has the potential to take a significant piece of the market. So tell me a little bit now that you're in this kind of early stage of kind of the hockey stick ramp on what you see when you look at your 10-year picture. And of
Sure.
course, I'm not holding you to this, but it's just I want to get the motivation behind your
Well,
commitment to the
I only
company.
need plus or minus 10% for 10 years, Jason. I'm very accurate. So look, I just want to restate that the guidance for this fiscal year is 8 to 10 million, right? That's for
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
fiscal 26, which is March 31st. We're coming up on the end of the fiscal year. So, and we'll give guidance for fiscal 27 when we report in June. So,
Good.
so just to clear that up. So look, the vision is nitric oxide, you know, generator that we have the technology. People are obviously have a lot to do to catch up to us, and we don't know if they ever will. But this existing market for what's approved around the world, and again, I just caution in the US, cardiac surgery is not approved, but the rest of the world it is. So this approved indication and use in the United States, this right now, as we sit here today, is about a $700 million market, and we think that the expansion globally is going to bring this market up close to $1 billion, with the US being, let's say, 350 to 400 in 5 years, let's call it. Um, you know, globally, there are places that can't get cylinders, right? You're not, we have a hospital, the U.S. Naval Hospital in Guam. They can't get cylinders. You're not shipping cylinders to Guam. It's probably it's hard to get cylinders in New Zealand. There are places where it's difficult. There are places where the infrastructure, the roads just can't handle them bouncing around in the trucks and so forth. So there's a lot of pent-up demand for what our product brings. And you'll see that over the next several years internationally. You will see a turning point internationally sometime in the next 6 to 12 months where you're going to start to see us saying, we want another tender, we want another tender, and these things are going to start happening. We expect tender victories to come in this calendar year, at least the first group of them, right? So that opens up the market, and then there's the further vision of nitric oxide for respiratory infections. We did a study. We've done several studies in the hospital where we treated respiratory infections, viral infections. We did 3 studies in bronchiolitis. So those are 3-month-old babies who are hospitalized due to a viral infection. Most of that is RSV infection, about 70%, and the rest would be coronaviruses and so forth. We also did adult studies in the hospital during the pandemic. We did 35 patients there. One was non-COVID pneumonia. So those data were shown a couple of years ago. We also did a study at home, patients with non-tuberculous mycobacterial lung infection or NTM lung infection. 15 patients treated themselves, self-administration in their home for 12 weeks, close to 200 administrations per patient. There were no treatment-related serious adverse events. There were no treatment stoppage due to any adverse event or machine malfunction. Okay, so this is patients using our machine in the home. Now, again, they were using a breathing mask, not a ventilator. Okay, but we treated up to 250 parts per million of nitric oxide. The indicated dose for the current product and all our competitors is 20 parts per million, and the max number is 80 parts per million for safety purposes. We've treated 250 parts per million for these patients in their homes with no adverse events. Okay, nothing to speak.
There's probably a biologically limiting factor that after a certain
Correct.
amount, it has kind of no effect, which
It's
is what you
so
want.
yeah, 400 parts per million. Our body is our cells can resist nitric oxide damage up to 400 parts per million. The issue is when you give higher concentrations of nitric oxide, you introduce methemoglobinemia potential in patients. So what we do is we give the treatment of 250 parts per million. In this particular study we did, it was 40 minutes, 4 times a day for 2 weeks, and then 40 minutes for twice a day in the maintenance period for the next 10 weeks. So when
Makes
you give it
uh,
intermittently, you don't have the methemoglobinemia.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I just want to put that into some common language, which is the NO is so good, it actually probably hits binding sites on the hemoglobin, blocking oxygen at those extremely high levels.
Correct.
And
So
by the way, that was seen very early on with some of the artificial blood stuff that occurred in the 80s, where, the NO was. Just so there's some interesting science that absolutely validates this. This has been around for a long, long time.
right. So when you're asking for the 10-year vision, we see nitric oxide being used in the hospital for acute respiratory infections, acute viral infection. So when you see a patient with an exacerbation, maybe they're a COPD patient or some other type of patient, and they have a severe viral infection, exacerbation, and get hospitalized. Our vision is for the hospital to treat with nitric oxide as a first-line therapy to shorten their stay, to keep the patient alive and shorten their stay in the hospital. Because, a lot of patients, as you know, immunocompromised patients, whatever is causing their immunocompromised state, a lot of them end up dying from pneumonia. That's what eventually kills them in the end. So we believe that based on the data that's been shown by us and others, that nitric oxide can prevent this virus from progressing and causing this suffocation, right? I mean, basically your lungs just collapse underneath the pressure of your immune response that's come in to just
The NO
kill them.
increases lung dilation, allows better exchange of
And
gases.
it slows the virus. It slows the replication of the virus down. So it gives the immune
Interesting.
system time to catch up. And the immune system doesn't have to have this overload of a response to the lungs. So we slow the viral replication down with nitric oxide, and that allows the immune system to overcome it. Okay.
Good.
Now that's in the hospital. And in the home, we're looking at more refractory situations where, you're like NTM, refractory NTM patients who fail antibiotic therapy. They have no alternative. They don't
Sorry,
want
NTM.
non-tuberculous mycobacterial
Thank
lung
you.
infection, right? So this will be something where we've done the most work in NTM, but we have data in other types of infections. So these are, lung infections that are deep inside the lung. The immune system can't attack. Maybe it has biofilm protecting it, and the immune system can't even see it. So nitric oxide will penetrate biofilm, will allow antibiotics to work in synergistically with it. It will also relieve pressure on the immune system. So we've seen that in NTM patients and some other types of patients. So our vision is to have nitric oxide systems in the home where people are using it chronically to keep their chronic bacterial infection at bay and also prevent, as a prophylaxis, prevent the viral infection that's going to eventually kill them. It's
Wow.
very hard for a virus to take hold for a patient who's taking nitric oxide at high concentrations multiple times a day. There have been studies with
Never
cigarette
real, by
smoke.
the way, that never really even occurred to me that that NO could have an impact on everything, on infections, even at the biofilm level.
Oh yeah, we have a patent. It was an old patent from the company before I got involved. I think it expires this year actually, but it was a patent on nitric oxide penetrating biofilm.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it works for sure.
So suffice to say, the market is potentially very, very large. The commercialization challenge you face is kind of changing the paradigm, introducing a new therapy and getting people comfortable. And by the way, as you mentioned, a very safe therapy, which kind of makes it more easily introduced, particularly when you start talking about at-home use.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about this is the first generation system. How does you have a second generation system coming? Tell me what's the difference between first generation and second generation, and what does second gen do for you?
So the second generation system is about 60% the size of the first generation system. So making it smaller, going from 44 pounds to 24 pounds and shrinking the physical footprint. So that's one win. The second is that our first generation machine wasn't usable in ground or air transportation. Second generation machine will be usable in ground and air transportation. It'll have what's called there's this MRI use sometimes with nitric oxide, and you have to get to a certain um, um, compatibility with MRI. So we'll be able to match our competitors with MRI compatibility where they stand and where we stand. So that's an improvement with the second gen versus the first gen. In addition, the filter is easier to access and change. The alarms are better. The screen is better. User interface is better. And one of the complaints from our current customers is that, hey, your backup system. So we have a built-in backup system, just like there's two cylinders, right? So there's a built-in backup cylinder as well for our competitors. So we have a built-in generator. So the backup generator was just that, a backup. It had limited functionality. And they asked us, could you make the functionality in your new system, for your backup be as good as your main system? And we've done that as well. So we listened to our customers and we were giving them everything that they want. So one
I
other
just want to
thing.
interrupt you for a second because you mentioned small portable, and it sounded like something small enough that first responders could be using it. Is there an acute setting where you could see that as part of the first responder armamentarium?
I don't think so. We've gotten inquiries about that. I think it would be need to be smaller than 24 pounds. And again, we can do that. Our system we built for the home use was, first generation of that was 20 pounds. So we could probably make a system that is 8 to 10 pounds for exactly what you're saying. But that would be somebody else saying,
Down the
hey,
road.
yeah, someone else saying we want to do this. Hey, we'd like to pay you to build something like this. But there are acute scenarios, first line of defense type things where it would be useful. Yes. It's just not a program of ours.
Gotcha. And talking a little bit about that, you just tickled me because you and I have been talking in the past about neurodegenerative disorders, and you mentioned having someone else pay the freight. So tell me, we haven't really talked about that yet. There was recently a transaction, NeuroNAS. Can you talk a little bit about what the strategy is behind that and why you did that?
Yeah, so we're interested in nitric oxide, everything nitric oxide. So everything we've done to date is putting more nitric oxide in the body, including going to treat cancer as well at very high concentrations. But we came across a gentleman, who's affiliated with Harvard and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem as well. He was looking at reducing the concentration or the amount of nitric oxide produced in the brain. He saw in many scenarios of autism that overproduction of nitric oxide in the brain was playing a major factor in autistic patients. So he developed a model. He did some great work. It's groundbreaking data that it was published. We thought it was amazing, but it's more of controlling or reducing partially the manufacturing of neuronal nitric oxide synthase or NNOS in the brain, and that was taking autistic mice and making them act normally. So reversing autism. That was very exciting to us. So of course we licensed the product and we spent some money on it, but we came on hard times in the last couple of years. Tough to find money in the space. So we've had a gentleman who helped us with this early on come in and say, I will go raise money for this and be the CEO. So he is the CEO. He raised a few $1 million for this, and company took notice, and we signed a binding letter of intent in January to have them take this product, and we would get some money up front, some milestones, and own a piece of the new combined company as well. So again, a great technology, certainly has a clear path to human studies. And as you know, Jason, we'll see the efficacy of this translating from mice to humans. It'll be the first time this particular mechanism has been tested in humans. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? We have to see that, right? There's no guarantees on that. But from getting where they are today to human studies, I think that path is very clear. And the safety profile in animals is fantastic. We're very excited about the therapeutic window of this product. But again, I don't know
So
if
you're balancing the need to conserve capital, right? You don't have
correct.
unlimited capital with the potential opportunity that could transform, right? It's a transformative opportunity if it works. So,
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
So here you kind of you're managing time, opportunity, and capital, and this was the best way to do that.
Absolutely. Very well said.
Okay, good. So help me understand going forward how you think about financing the company and as you march towards kind of an inflection point, a break even, you're ultimately going to get to a point where you're going to be able to actually build your balance sheet over time. So the next kind of 24, 36 months is going to be this critical chaperoning time. Help me understand how you're kind of balancing this. You have domestic, you have international, you have a second generation system coming. I'm sure if I handed you 50 or $100 million, you could find lots of ways to spend it. So how are you managing your way through?
Yeah. So, the money we put on the balance sheet in the last, 4 or 5 months has given us, a nice cushion here. We have the cash to get to the approval of our second generation product and launch it. We'll see how the launch goes and how the international business is shaping up as we get to the end of 2026. We may have enough cash to get to that break-even point with what's on the balance sheet. Um, we'll see, right? I mean, there are various factors that we can't control, but we have a bunch of different scenarios, and several of them get us to profitability. Um, that means we're not going to be pushing our pipeline forward, Jason, obviously, right? Because we would put all of our cash towards that commercial. So yeah, if there is an opportunity to get money, like you said, you know, we would be obviously very fiscally responsible in how we spent it. But we think it's very good money spent in the infectious disease space if it becomes available. So maybe once we're cash flow positive, if we have to wait that long, we can start to allocate money to the infectious disease side. And of course, the hospital path is faster and less expensive than the home path. So again, we have to see what kind of capital is available to us and what opportunities are in front of us before we make those decisions. But we're in a pretty good place right now with cash.
As an analyst, I never assume a company is going to be acquired. I don't think that's a good analysis because what's my ability to predict something like that, right? So I always look fundamentally at the revenue stream. But, I do look at what's happening here, and I think as you become more successful, if I were a gas supplier, I would want to acquire you quickly, right? So, is there, when you think about are you thinking the same way? Like, hey, my job is to execute the business plan of this company, and if somebody wants to buy me and the price is right, we can always talk. But until then, let me commercialize the product, build the revenues, build the infrastructure around that process.
That's exactly the mentality. We're running a business here. We're not doing this so hoping someone comes over and buys us. We're running this business to be here for the next 10 years. And if something, comes across, we're a public company, right? If someone comes up and says they want to talk to us, we will entertain that. But we're not betting on it. We're not banking on it. It's not a goal of ours. Our goal is to get our second generation approved, get the cash flow positivity, add value to our shareholders, get a lot of value for them, and make the world a better place with nitric oxide, not just in the hospital, but again, as we said, into the home. That's what we're going to do. And if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, we want to take it from here, Steve, and here's a bunch of money," then, so be it.
Beautiful. So, and by the way, I like hearing CEOs say that because look, you've been doing this a long time. You're well established. You don't have to do this. You're doing this clearly because you believe in it. And I think that brings credibility to the company and to your argument. And as an analyst, these are the kinds of companies that I really enjoy following because I want to see it grow. I want to see it execute. I think given where the stock price is today, given the fact that you're capitalized, given the fact that you're commercializing towards a product, I think it's a really good time to be looking at the stock. I want to thank you, Steve. I enjoy our interactions very much. Appreciate you working with us and look forward to watching the progress as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason.
All
Thanks.
right, take care. Bye.